I want to start our conversation, Senator, with what's going on in Texas. Vermont is no stranger to recent natural disasters, massive flooding. What are your thoughts about what Texas is going through and what it says about the future of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which, as you know, President Trump has said he effectively wants to disband?
Well, first of all, Texas is so heartbreaking because kids in camps got swept away. So these disasters have a lot of human suffering, but when it's kids, that's really brutal. And then, the river rising like 26 feet in 45 minutes, not a chance. The Weather Service person who normally would be trying to get the warnings out apparently was a victim of Doge. But the idea that the president is talking about getting rid of FEMA, Secretary Noem the same, they can do that when they pass an executive order stopping flooding, stopping natural disasters. Then we'll have a conversation. We have to have FEMA in Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee, of course, Vermont. This is the anniversary of floods we had a year ago on the same day that we had a flood 2 years ago. So we absolutely need FEMA, but FEMA needs to be reformed, not abolished.
How does it need to be reformed? I've seen op-eds that you've written. You are complimentary of what FEMA does to put things in position ahead of time, what it does immediately after a disaster, but the longer-term reimbursement and other financial assistance. Could that be dealt with differently?
Yes. Rely on local control. Empower local officials. Empower the local communities, to make decisions about what needs to be done and when. Have them have much more authority over the expenditure of funds that are authorized and be able to do the day-to-day work that's required over a sustained period of time. Let me give an example. Yeah. Like in Lyndonville, Vermont, Stannard, Vermont, there's like 300 people in that community. They have to get permission from Puerto Rico about the size of stone that they'll use to repave a road that was washed away. Okay, so just think about that. You've got folks who are local officials and they want to act. They've got their community residents saying, when are we going to get our road back so I can get home or get back out in the fields? And you have to go through this incredible process of getting permission. Who should make the decision about whether you use a 18-inch culvert or a 36-inch culvert, right? It's the local people who are going to be affected by the decision. So my view here is that you've got to take advantage of that incredible energy at the local level where people feel an acute sense of responsibility
and urgency
to get the show back on the road. Now, all we'd have to do, I think, is we'd have to have accountability because local officials who are empowered, in my view, to make these decisions have to be responsible.
Right.
But instead of having accountability by micromanaging the size of the culvert, you have oversight so that there's hell to pay if local officials abuse the discretion that they should have, in my view, decision-making authority and flexibility.
This administration, as you know, has talked about block grants, just big money, one big check, give it to the state, give it to the locals, let them do whatever they want to do.
No, because the block grant really is an excuse for having the federal government back out and not address the reality of what the situation is with this particular natural disaster. I mean, we had you had that Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. You have this horrible situation on the Guadalupe River. You had our floods. And you cannot predict exactly what that is going to be. So there is always a budget question that is the job of Congress to supplement the disaster relief fund that's based on the real world of what disasters have occurred. So the bottom line here is I don't trust this so-called block grant because I think it's essentially just moving the responsibility back to the states. And Vermont for many years went without bad storms. And our delegation would support supplemental funds when it happened to some other of our American brothers and sisters. And that's generally been bipartisan. We've got to maintain that, but we do have to empower the local folks who absolutely are on the scene, want to make the decision, want to get it done. They know where the backhoes are. They know who's got a front-end loader. They know what they can do to get in the stream bank if they have to do some adjustments. And it's a local control. empowerment that I have, which is essentially a very sort of conservative notion, something that we embrace in Vermont.
Let me ask you about tariffs. The President said yesterday, and his Council of Economic Advisors put out a report, tariffs so far have had no inflationary effect. You've been on the Senate floor saying that it would. And how has it affected Vermont in relationship to Vermonters and Canada?
Very badly. I mean, there's two things. First of all, about the tariffs. The farmers are paying 25% more for their fertilizer, so there is inflation, all right? Some of our manufacturers are paying much more for their component parts. So they're sitting on that price rise, but they can't do it indefinitely, all right? That's number one.
Eventually, that's going to crack into the market, is what you're telling me.
That's correct. That's correct.
And consumers will see it and have to pay it.
Absolutely. It's a tax. It's a tax. The second thing is the uncertainty and the chaos. So when I talk to folks, like at Orvis, you get great fly rods there. They don't know day to day what their parts will cost, because today the tariff will be on, tomorrow it might be off, today it'll be 10%, tomorrow it'll be 40%. So what they're saying is that in addition to the price pressure, it's the uncertainty in business, like all of us in life need some certainty. So no, I think they're very, very destructive. But with Canada, our major trading partner, and by the way, Vermont is one of 34 states where Canada's our major trading partner. We have the tourism industry has been severely affected. It's been very, very hurtful for the Canadians to see who they thought was their best friend, the United States of America, insult them. You know, the 51st state, the Premier Trudeau was the governor of Canada. And it's been heartbreaking for a lot of our Vermont hospitality industry, where they're getting cancellations, they're not getting rebookings, and it's really had a very negative impact, probably tourism down at least 40%.
Is that part of this conversation fixable? The way Canadians, and I have friends there who tell me they genuinely feel in ways they've never felt before alienated.
That's right, and totally unnecessary. You know,
is it fixable?
Over the long term, it is, not with an attitude that we're seeing from President Trump, who seems to take pleasure in insulting people for no particular reason, but to show that he's a big shot. And that has been very offensive. When I went to Canada on a Codel, the first one, the senators have met with the Canadian Premier in 5 years, led by Senator Shaheen. And New Hampshire, of course, is similar to Vermont in terms of our affection for Canada and dependence on their tourism industry. But they were very, very gracious and very, very desirous of reestablishing the bond of friendship that we've had in the commercial interaction that we've had. But they were candid in acknowledging that the domestic pressure on them from Canadians who were saying, what is going on? Why are you insulting me? I'm not going to take that. Those political leaders up there obviously have to pay attention to the feelings of the Canadian people that they represent first and foremost.
When President Biden was in charge and you had a majority in the Senate, your side effectively rolled Republicans on the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act. How did it feel to get rolled on the big, beautiful bill?
Pretty bad. I mean, first of all, you know, using this reconciliation process, which is now the norm, is essentially given up on bipartisanship.
It has.
And I find that to be not only emotionally disturbing, because I like to work with anybody who's wanting to solve a problem, but I think potentially really threatening to the well-being of our democracy, because the big challenges we face, like making an affordable healthcare system, we have to do that whether you voted for Trump or you voted for Harris. Having a FEMA operation that works, these floods, they go to red state Texas or they come to blue state Vermont. So the challenge—
27 events last year that cost more than $1 billion.
Yeah, there you go.
Each.
Exactly. And my point here is that these things that are having an impact on our lives and our security, they really have equal opportunity pain. This bill that was just passed, just Republican votes, is going to inflict pain on a bipartisan basis. I mean, the cuts to health care through Medicaid, the progress we've made on opioid addiction reduction, that's a significant result of the expenditures that we've made through Medicaid. So we're putting in peril this horrible scourge of opioid addiction rising instead of diminishing that has affected rural areas, red or blue. So I'm extremely concerned about this, but I do believe it's absolutely important that all of us who believe in bipartisanship as a way of making our democracy stronger, as a way of coming up with solutions that are beneficial, regardless of your political belief, that we've got to try to do our best to get the Congress to function again in a way that it must in order to be helpful to American people.
You know, people who watch this program are somewhat confused by the different portrayals they've heard of the bill that just passed. Democrats like you have a kind of sky is going to fall Medicaid assessment. Republicans like, no, we're just nibbling at the edges. And it's people who are young and able-bodied. We're just asking them to work for 20 hours a week or volunteer, fill out some paperwork. It's not a catastrophe. And people who are sitting at home might reasonably say, wait, which is it?
Well, that's right, and that's where the information and misinformation is. It makes it very tough for people to make a judgment. But here's what you know: you've already had a community hospital in Nebraska close as a result of the impending cuts in reimbursement. So this will play out in time.
And we'll all get a chance to see what actually happened.
And we'll get a chance to see what actually happened. But what you do know...
And you're confident that the consequences will be more dire than the Republicans of the White House have described.
Well, 17 million people losing their health care, that's brutal. And when they lose their health care, they still show up at their community hospital. And, you know, folks in rural areas want to help. Those hospitals will keep providing care until they just run out of money and can't.
Yeah, but the Republicans say, well, this is $50 billion hospital stabilization fund. That's going to solve everything.
But there was $1 trillion in cuts. So 50 billion versus 1 trillion, do the math. It's not going to work out. But, you know, I want to step back just a minute
here.
Sure,
please.
We've got a broken healthcare system. It's too expensive. You know, employers who provide health care, by the way, are going to pay more now because of the cost shift. All those people who no longer have health care, the hospitals, the providers are going to try to raise their rates in the private insurance market. We've had like a 25% increase in the cost of these wonderful employers who'd like to give their employees a raise, but they got to eat the health care premium increase. What we should be doing is try to reform our delivery system and have it. We should be going after the price gouging that you see in the pharma industry, okay? That's a way to try to bring costs down. And instead, the approach that I'm seeing in the one beautiful bill is to bring costs down by taking healthcare away, not by improving the delivery system or doing an attack on the price gouging that exists like in the pharmaceutical industry, but just saying we'll lower the cost of healthcare by taking Major Garrett's health care away. Well, it won't really lower the cost because if you get sick, you're going to go to the hospital.
Speaking of pharmaceuticals, the president said this week that there could be tariffs of up to 200% on European pharmaceuticals.
Well, this is another indication of why I think the president is completely abusing the tariff authority that he claims to have.
Congress should have it. The Constitution says
that's right.
The entire 18th to 19th century experience in America was.
That's exactly right. And it's in the Constitution that it's Congress's authority. And whatever the tariff policy is, number one, it should originate in Congress. And number two, it should be based on a policy. And that policy should have as its goal strengthening America. When you have the president using arbitrary claim of authority, emergency, threat of an invasion from Canada. I mean, that's how absurd it is. It's a national security exemption that he claims. Then it's personal for him. He likes you or he doesn't. And by the way, this is one of the things that's so horrible about this. Big companies like Apple, they were going to get a tariff. Well, you remember Tim Cook was sitting on the platform with the other billionaire tech folks. He calls up the president, no tariff on Apple. We've got a small company in Vermont where they're dependent on Chinese inputs. And this business is going to go out of business.
Because they can't call up the president.
They don't have the number. They don't have the president's number, Scott Bessett's number. No, I'm not sure he's taking my calls. But this is my point. It's arbitrary. So whatever policy we have, whether it's a tax policy or a tariff policy, which is tariff, it should have a basis that's not personal, but that is based on the goal of making us a stronger country. And you can't do that if it's an arbitrary action by the president because he's irritated at somebody who made him angry. and then he gives an exemption because it's somebody that he likes or knows or contributed.
Senator Peter Welch, Vermont Democrat.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.